DiPento. I've taught as an adjunct journalism professor for 5 years, and I'm here to talk tonight about how we can reinvent J School. So diversity in newsrooms, we know that this is an issue that's been ongoing, and according to recent statistics, mainstream newsrooms have not been improving much. 69% of the Washington Post newsroom is white. 81% of the New York Times newsroom is white. And 81% of the Wall Street Journal newsroom is also white. A more diverse newsroom, from what I've learned and listened to this year, starts in the classroom. So imagine a newsroom whose staff actually reflects the communities they intend to serve and cover through their reporting. We might have stories that look a little bit more like this. So over here we have a story from Nicole Hannah-Jones of the New York Times, where she talks intimately about the struggle she had finding a school for her daughter in segregated New York City. And here, this is an image of a piece from Philadelphia reporter Pete Johnson, who is a native of North Philly, and he covers urban issues and incarceration and other things. So there are many barriers of entry for students of color who wish to pursue journalism. And through listening this year, I've come to a better understanding of these barriers that exist. So a little bit about how I met educators this year. So my main entry point was by hosting EdShift chats on Twitter. So these are monthly chats on Twitter where I gather educators to talk about certain issues. We've talked about accreditation, diversity, and more. So this has given me a great entry point into knowing, not only expanding my circle of educators, but also getting to know issues in a deeper way. I've also continued to connect with educators on Twitter. I've started conversations in 2 Facebook groups where journalism educators convene. So these groups are the O&A Educators Group and the Disruptive Journalism Educators Network. I've also connected with educators through my work here at the Town Knight Center. I've met with professors on campus. I've interviewed them over the phone. I've met with many of you at conferences like O&A, and also through my role as an adjunct journalism professor this semester at Brooklyn College. And lastly, I've also gotten to know issues educators care about through surveys that I've created. So here's a little bit about what I've heard from educators about how to make journalism education a bit more inclusive. Members of the community have said creating diversity scholarships, hiring a more diverse faculty, and recruiting outside of who applies. Other ideas that have been promoted, introducing high school students to journalism, paying for student internships, reevaluating tenure, and introducing students to journalists of color. It didn't feel like a place I'd ever see myself at. So this is one of the heartbreaking comments from one of my students this semester at Brooklyn College. She told me that her class recently visited the New York Times and she simply didn't identify with anyone in the newsroom. So these are a few reasons why I created the Diversity in J Schools chat. So here's a screenshot. It's currently a Slack channel, and this is promoted as a safe place for educators to discuss diversity and inclusivity in journalism schools. So this is actually the second iteration of this project. Initially, I had started it on another platform that I was beta testing, and the response that I got from educators and participants was that the user experience wasn't very good. So this was an instance of needing to listen to the community and pivot, and this is how I arrived at the second iteration of this, and we're giving it a try. So a lot of social journalism, I believe, is reaching out to the community, starting and creating, taking feedback, and moving on if something doesn't quite work right. So a little bit about why I felt the Diversity in J Schools chat would be effective. So as I mentioned, I've been talking to a lot of educators this year, and this was coming up constantly, the need for diversity in J Schools. Another promising thing was I started a conversation in one of the Facebook groups, and over 85 educators and others commented saying that they were interested in starting a conversation on diversity. So this gave me the courage to launch this as a project and get the community involved because I was hearing that educators were ready to take action when it comes to diversity. So this is just one of the 2 programs in Reinventing J School, which is the hub I created to serve journalism educators. Here's just a little screenshot of the website. So in my listening, I also heard that educators are doing whatever they can to stay up to date. This is inherent to their jobs. So again, I'm trying to imagine a world, what journalism educators across the world could do when they join forces to tackle new challenges together. So this is what led me to create the second part of my project, Academic Allies. So Academic Allies currently is a Google form. Educators elect, they sign up, they answer a few questions. They elect to be paired up with another educator. So they can elect to either be matched up with a peer, or perhaps they're interested in a mentor or mentee relationship. So again, using this feedback from the community, I was talking to educators, hearing that staying up to date is critical to their jobs. I also pitched this idea in one of the groups where educators convene, the O&A educators group. I feel like I can't say educators enough. So here, in pitching this idea, I had about 20 or so people comment saying, yeah, that's a great idea. I would love to have this kind of resource. So again, this gave me the courage to push forward and at least create something. So in thinking of these 2 ideas, both diversity and the challenge that educators have in staying up to date, if we don't do these in journalism, higher education, and if academia fails to prepare the next generation of journalists for the challenges ahead, many people in this community think journalism education is doomed. So just the other day, Neiman recently released a report, a 2018 predictions report. So one professor from Texas State, Cindy Royal, her predictions are in here, and she's talking about what journalism schools can do to tweak and refine their programs. Because here she says, otherwise, students will begin to flee from their programs and seek out other degrees at their universities or a more innovative degree at other schools. So this is the challenge we face in journalism higher education. This is a real threat and also a chance for a lot of opportunity to change things. Again, I can't stress enough, it's a critical time for journalism education, and what we do today has an impact on what tomorrow looks like. So here's a few more metrics which have guided some of the decisions I've made. So here, I know this is a little tough to see, but this is a survey that I co-wrote with some of the Town Night folks here at CUNY. And one of the most important things, we launched this survey at the O&A conference. 68 educators participated in this. One of the most important things educators said was that they need to stay up to date and that this is a critical part of their jobs and what they think about most. And then over here, a few of the comments are about diversity, and people specifically in this survey pulled that out and expressed interest in creating more conversation around diversity. So these are some of the metrics that have helped lead me to continue to push for these programs. I've also kept writing Medium posts throughout the year. So I was writing pretty regularly this semester, each week. And oftentimes, I think this is a hard challenge. I'm not always creative. I don't always have something interesting to say. But I think as social journalists, we owe it to ourselves to talk about the process we've taken to arrive at what we've created. So I tried to do that. I tried to show the good and the bad, what worked, what didn't work. So one of the little screenshots up here is a piece that I wrote about a failed Kickstarter campaign that I had launched, and I talk about some of the challenges with that and what I learned. So again, I think advice for future social journalists is to explain your process and show what you're doing, feed that back to the community, and look for insight from them and allow them to help shape what you create. So lastly, just to wrap up, 19 educators have signed up for Academic Allies. I'm in the process of pairing up these educators and plan to share resources, inspiration, and more with them in the near future. 15 educators have signed up for the Diversity in J Schools chat. And lastly, 100%. I am 100% ready for change in the J School classroom. So please join me. Thank you.